My name is Moha Bensofia, and I am the CEO of a neurotech company called Mendi. What is Mendi? Mendi is a company that I got involved with as its first investor. But then what happened was that I became one of its first users. And the effects that it had on me made me become profoundly involved with the world of neurofeedback and eventually into neuroscience and to working with institutions that I would have never imagined because I was a terrible student back in the day. But now I work with NASA and Princeton and Stanford and much smarter people. And I see this as a possibility for us to change the brain health of millions and eventually billions of people like me that actually need something that works, and basically people that need the training wheels so that they can make those improvements in their lives with whatever their situation is. What is neurofeedback, and how is it that it can help people working at the companies that we are all involved in, because we're all in this startup world? I live in a country called Sweden, and obviously it's snowy and it's cold, and a lot of people get very depressed. And something that I always kept hearing that I didn't really relate to very much was people being burned out, people being exhausted. Like the term burnout is not something that me being from Costa Rica, I would hear very often, but it's something that is very, very common. Oddly enough, there's not a lot of research on how many people are burned out and how it affects the Swedish population, but it's something that I would keep hearing all the time. And it was all the times like, well, yeah, I hit the wall, I burned out, I burned out, I burned out, I burned out. And what we realize is that people in Sweden are so committed to building these companies, and they're so committed to so many goals that sometimes they forget about the most important one, which is their own well-being. We talk about all these really lofty things. Everybody talks about the environment. Everybody talks about all these great things, and we are all big proponents of these things. But in order for us to achieve great things, we need to be in a good place ourselves. With me, my journey in Sweden started in 2014. When I got here, I got a job at a startup called Fishbrain, which I'm very grateful to. And that evolved into different jobs with different companies and my career as an angel investor and all sorts of things. But after my time in Libya, which is where I was before coming here, where I got in a little bit of trouble with ISIS, as they did not like my views on women's rights and several other issues. When I got here, I came here with a lot of PTSD. I was having horrible nightmares. I was having all sorts of things. Very easily stressed person. Very easily, any sort of frustration would turn into aggression. And I've always suffered from a lot of anxiety, and obviously that's on top of it, as well as ADHD and a few other things. But still, I was able to perform certain tasks that made me build a good career here in Sweden, even though I've never been able to just sit down in front of a computer and work for 2-3 hours at once. I don't think even 1 hour in my time at Wear Labs or any of these companies. So what happened when I got access to neurofeedback for the first time, and the form of neurofeedback that I got involved with was called Fnir's neurofeedback, which is Heg neurofeedback, through Mendi. What it did is it immediately made my anxiety become dramatically better. I was in a better mood. Everybody's like, you're happier. 5 weeks after I started using it, I felt so good. I remember calling the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world, who was a great friend of mine and a mentor to me. And I said, I just read my first book in bed at midnight. I feel great. Now remember, I read my first book in my 40s. And basically this took me on this journey of why is it that this technology exists? That neurofeedback has existed for many, many, many decades. Millions of people have reported improvements. And why is it that it is not accessible to everybody? Why isn't it accessible to every single person at every single company? I mean, it makes sense business-wise, right? Because if you want people to perform better, if they're in great health, if they're feeling great, you're going to get more out of them. It's a very, very simple equation. I got to the point where I was so obsessed with neurofeedback and so obsessed with Mendi and such a believer because I saw how much better my life was. Like, I couldn't believe that I could sit down in front of a computer and I could work for hours at a time. Now it's very regular for me to have 15, 16-hour days like many of you do. So maybe it's not that impressive, but for me, it was incredibly impressive because I'm one of those people that's never been able to do it. And it brings me back to this thing when I got the job because the team believed in me, not because I'm qualified to be the CEO of a neurotech company, but because I am part of a company where two much smarter guys built an incredible product. And I just feel it's my obligation to make it available to everybody. What I realized was that if all these people that are using Mendi, if all these people that are using various forms of neurofeedback, and I think there is a benefit in all of them, and I'm a big fan of every single company that is trying to do something to improve our well-being, because in the end, that's going to translate into better relationships, better treatment of our children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as well as more productivity in the workplace. What I have been obsessing about is basically, how is it that we can make all these people that are helping build all these unicorns, that are doing all these things, that are raising families, how is it that we can make them a bit happier? And how do we track that? How do we put the scientific evidence behind those improvements? Because yes, people tracking with the Oura Ring, they use Mendi, they realize that their sleep cohorts got better. Go ahead and try it. Or the Whoop Band, the recovery cohorts are way better. Go ahead and try it. These are real things. But what I'm saying is, how do we make every single one of you that is trying to build these companies that are all going to impact the world positively, hopefully, how is it that we make it so that you, who is at the core of building those companies, you, who is a lot more important than those numbers and those metrics and those KPIs, how do we make you be happier and less stressed? And it's actually really simple. The principle behind neurofeedback is the principle of control. When you eat something, let's say you're allergic to gluten or dairy or whatever, and I give you a ton of gluten or dairy, which you are allergic to, what's going to happen? You're going to get sick. So what is that going to make you do? You're going to be more careful and you're going to not consume it next time. The problem is that you cannot visualize stress. You cannot visualize what it is that makes you be burned out. You cannot visualize that thing that affects you negatively as far as a negative thought. But if you could, then you would have the control, you would have the ability to move away from it, to steer it in a different direction. What Mendi does is it increases oxygenated blood flow to your prefrontal cortex, which is going to give you a healthier brain. At the same time, there's intention-based neurofeedback. So basically what you're going to be doing is, let's say you're trying to, it doesn't matter if it's sleep better, be less stressed, focus better, or learn how to play the piano. It doesn't really matter. But what it's going to do is it's going to teach you to build the neural pathways, those bridges that connect between those neurons so that you can make that more possible. It's going to give you the control to be able to perform and to improve in the way that you want to. And that is the most important thing. If you don't know how to flex your bicep, then you're not going to be able to strengthen your bicep. It's the same principle, but with the brain. We live in a society where the prefrontal cortex is neglected many times because the amygdala is targeted and it's bombarded. So basically what the prefrontal cortex acts as is it's the decision matrix of the brain. It makes you make good decisions. And that is going to make you be able to live a healthier life. Because yes, it's going to make you be able to put down that fourth bag of chips or put down the bottle of vodka. And at the same time, it's going to make you say, you know what, maybe I don't want to just stay in bed. I want to get up and go for a walk or go for a run or whatever. It's going to make you make better choices but at the same time, it's going to increase your focus. At the same time, it's going to make you feel better. And that's going to spill over into another series of parts of your life that are going to impact you positively. Are we going to take questions or what's happening? I've been following you guys for more than a year. Gal Horowitz, great to meet you, Gal. How is it that a device like Mendi, by the way, this is Mendi, and everybody that knows me knows that I'm not a big salesy person. So selling Mendis is actually the least of my concerns. We sell a lot of these things, and we're more concerned about creating the best product in the world for everybody. My dream, and I have not been shy about this, and I get in trouble for saying it, is that at some point we give this technology to everybody free of cost. And there are ways of doing that. And that's what I'm going to be working on over the next few years. But how does it make your startup better to give your colleagues access to neurofeedback? Well, when those colleagues of yours, when they prioritize their brain health, and by the way, brain health is as important as many other factors. Physical health, for example. If you're somebody that is incredibly in pain, that is somebody that is incredibly weak, that doesn't even go out for walks, obviously you're deteriorating. The same thing happens with your brain. If you're strengthening your brain, that's going to give you something called brain resilience. And that's going to make you be able to handle what life throws at you, whether it's work plus deadlines plus a sick child or whatever it may be. It's going to make you be able to handle it in a much better way. And that's going to make you treat everybody better because you're in a better mood, because you feel better. That's going to make you perform better because you slept better. That's going to make you be able to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to make you, again, learn how to play the guitar or cooking or whatever it is a lot better. So if you are a company, and by the way, just so you know, I'm very excited because for example, the UFC, which is the Ultimate Fighting Championship, is going to start implementing Mendi for all of its fighting roster. That's almost 700 fighters. We're doing research with NASA on dyslexia and ADD. We're doing all sorts of really exciting things. But if I'm going to really tone it down, is before performing a task, before going ahead and tackling something, imagine if you could really tap into that state of mind and tap into that place in a neural way that you need to go into. Imagine that. Imagine if before going in and having a sales meeting, or before going in and chatting with another company about doing some sort of collaboration, you could really get yourself primed, get yourself to be at your best before entering that. Now that applies for a training session if you're going to go hit the squat rack, but it also applies for a date, and it also applies for going into a divorce settlement. I mean, this applies to absolutely everything. And the same principle that makes a teenage girl, because this is a very relevant thing, because I hear a lot of these and I speak to a lot of parents, stop having panic attacks, is the same. It's the same thing that would make a 65-year-old man be able to sleep better or be able to not stress about whatever it is. For me, it taught me how to be able to tie a tie, which is one of those embarrassing things that you normally wouldn't say. But at age 40, I didn't know how to tie a tie. At age 41, I learned how to tie a tie. And it's one of those things that has been impossible for me. Just like a dyslexic person has trouble with left and right, it was one of those things where I just couldn't tie a tie. And I, as an adult, had my mom tying them for me. And I remember it was very funny because I started going into the office for a whole week wearing ties. And one of our interns asked me why I was wearing a tie. And I said, well, I'm proud that I can tie one. That untangling of the brain. And I speak in layman's terms, and I speak to a lot of scientists, and I have taught myself to simplify it because I say a lot of things that are very technical. That is the kind of thing that resonates with somebody like me, somebody like my mom, who did not go to high school. So bottom line is, if you have a company where everybody has done the best possible thing for themselves physically and for their mental health. And the physical part of your mental health, we're talking real neural pathways. Your brain is shrinking since age 23. You're fighting that decay daily. You're improving with each session. What Mendi does is we build games for you to be able to visualize your neural activity and improve your brain health. It's exciting. It's like playing Candy Crush or any of these games, but with your brain, and it rewards you for making improvements. And it's got nudges, and it'll tell you things like, okay, all right, you've done this. There's a layer of things. Maybe, you know, one of the things on your task list today is to brush your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed, or vice versa. Those kinds of things. Neurofeedback is very powerful, and within 5 years, I believe it will be something that everybody will do. All right, Sidita Hassi, what do you think of neurofeedback therapy for adult ADHD? FDA didn't approve it yet, but simply recognizes it as a calming device. Sidita, let me check how much time I have. Oh, wow. I've been speaking for 15 minutes. Sidita, yes, it's actually very powerful, and I would be a case. So you're literally talking to one of the use cases for adult ADHD. I'm in my 40s. I was born in the 70s. I will tell you that improving your focus and a lot of things come with using neurofeedback. But when we talk about neurofeedback, and I'm going to keep this really quickly, is there are different modalities of neurofeedback. There's you know, all sorts of different things, EEG, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know exactly what the FDA didn't approve. What Mendi does is it uses FNIRS, which is functional near infrared spectroscopy, to measure the level of redness of red in the blood, oxygenated blood flow to the brain. So what it does is if you increase the oxygenated blood flow to your brain, it gives you a healthier brain. And a healthier brain means that that's going to help with a ton of different things. Look at it this way. If I have a stronger body, it's going to make carrying the bags from the grocery shop easier. I mean, that's not specifically what I did when I strengthened my body, but it's one of the many things. So look at those grocery bags, lifting weights, etc., as, you know, ADHD, PTSD, insomnia, stress. It's mostly US who doesn't recognize. Germany has lots of research showing positive results on kids' ADHD. I'm aware of the neurofeedback therapy. Might be a pharma game that opposes it. Now, I am not, Sidita, great questions. I wish we had more time. And you can connect with me privately and we can chat about this. I spend a lot of time talking to people with specific cases and specific issues and specific interests. And clearly, you know a lot about this. Yes, Germany, yes, is a lot more advanced in that. What I will tell you is that, and I have these conversations with guys from the Stanford Research Lab in the US who are big believers in this. And a lot of them will tell me that we're still in that flat earth. It's still flat earth for a lot of scientists, and a lot of science and a lot of research is done for the sake of science and the sake of research. Now, I am no scientist and I am no researcher, but I will tell you what I do care about. I care about real impact, and doing research for the sake of having stripes on your jacket and for the sake of having published X amounts of things, to me is absolute bullshit. To me, it's about that single mom with 4 kids that's barely making rent. So for me, it's about access. And innovation happens when it happens. And sometimes we need to push through and we need to knock down walls in order to make it happen. And science a lot of times is very slow and it's very restrictive. And obviously it might be a little controversial that I throw that in there with 2 minutes left. But what I believe is that when people come out with the argument of why aren't there 10 million studies on this specific device? NASA's conducting research on this device. Different universities are conducting research. Sahlgrenska, which is the second biggest hospital in Europe, is using Mendi. The reason why there isn't is because we're early, because we're first, because Sammy and Rickard build something that is revolutionary. But there isn't 100 years of research behind this specific type. But the cohorts that we have are very, very, very interesting, and they are very promising, to say the least. But now, obviously, there is neurofeedback research on different modalities. And I think I'm running out of time. Thank you guys. If you want to talk about the pharma thing real quick, Sidita, because I see your question and I want to approach it in the last 30 seconds. I think I'm not anti-pharma, but I think pharma, the model with pharma is that if I give you these pills, for example, for ADHD, it's no good for me if you get better, because then I lose you as a customer. It's about lifetime value. It's kind of like Tinder. You know, if you find your wife or your husband, you're not going to use my platform. So I don't really want you to get better. I just want you that lifetime value. I want you to keep using it for the rest of your life. With us, it's a very different methodology. Thank you for the opportunity and have a great weekend.